You can go back to the 17th century when you go to Plymouth. Plymouth Plantation is actually a living museum in Plymouth that shows the original settlement of the Plymouth colony established in the 17th century. Take a look. Plymouth Plantation was the first permanent European settlement in southern New England. You can visit the Plymouth Plantation Living History Museum, built in 1947. It's a realistic recreation of the 17th century site. We talked to the Deputy Executive Director, Richard Pickering, about the plantation and its history.
And on our main campus is the 17th century English village, a reproduction of Plymouth as it looked 7 years after Mayflower landed. Wampanoag home site, where they can explore the indigenous history of the native peoples that have been here for thousands of years, and a craft center where they can see artisans at work. This time of year, so many of our guests are interested in Thanksgiving, and they want to see how people lived in the past. So throughout the day, they can come and see examples of Wampanoag people burning out boats and making the canoes that they use to go around New England, that they can see Pilgrim women cooking over their hearths. There's just so much to see every day.
Now, the plantation is Plimoth, correct?
Yes.
And the town is Plymouth. Why are there different spellings?
There is no set spelling in America until the 1800s, and Noah Webster coming along with his dictionary. In the 17th century, people are spelling things as it sounded to them in their heads. So William Bradford, the governor of Plymouth Colony, when he wrote his history, if you look at his handwritten version, it's of Plymouth Plantation, Plimoth. So when the museum was founded in 1947, like Colonial Williamsburg or Old Sturbridge Village, they wanted a quaint feeling to the name and something that would set them apart from the town, so they took the 1600 spelling.
It's a hands-on, entertaining living history experience dedicated to the native Wampanoag and English colonists. I'm wearing traditional pilgrim dress, and Elizabeth here is grinding corn, and this is actually an activity that visitors can try their hand at.
Oh, aye, indeed.
We then talked to Philip Wynn, site supervisor at the plantation, about the Wampanoags and their culture.
I mean, it's a pretty cold day out today, pretty freezing temperatures, so I'm dressed in my winter gear. I'm wearing a elk skin coat and raccoon fur to keep the wind from cutting down my back, and the rest of what I'm wearing is mostly deerskin, white-tailed deerskin. I'm taking full advantage of the warmth of the fire today, but what I'm doing here with this log and hollowing it out by burning and scraping is making a mushoon, or a traditional boat. A lot of old ways that my ancestors would work wood, especially when they made their boats, was all by burning and scraping. Not really a lot of chopping or chiseling back then, because the trees were just very fantastic in size, like about 6 to 8 feet wide, 300 feet tall. So my ancestors would burn those trees to knock them down, and then we would burn them hollow to make them into boats. So when my ancestors made their boats, they would keep the fire going 24 hours a day, because they would make it wherever the tree fell. They couldn't really bring that heavy stuff back home back then. So historically, yes, you would see my ancestors cooking food over the fire. You would see them getting warm at night, so they didn't have to stop what they're doing and go back home to do that stuff.
But what was the relationship like between the English colonists and the Wampanoags?
Seems like the relationship was mostly built on the trading and bartering going on between my ancestors and the people that built the Plymouth colony in the 1620s. Those people came here and really relied on the trade those first couple years and getting Wampanoag corn and vegetables and using that seed to plant themselves and, you know, become a permanent settlement here in Plymouth.
We asked Goodwife Alden what the conversation was like between the Pilgrims in the 1600s.
Well, we are careful not to engage over much in idle talk, for we are small in this town and news does travel fast. But we might say, how is it with you? If we have guests, we might say how it is with them. Otherwise, I might speak to my husband on all matters. Matters are going on in the town, things that he is involved in that I am not. Things are... Hi-ho! Things are... It depends on the weather. We can talk about the seasons. We can talk about... our favourite thing to talk about is our future here and what we will have and what is coming to us.
It really is like stepping back in time, and even the employees get something out of it.
I think when you open children's eyes to the power of the past and you help them learn how to ask questions. I love it that people come here and they get the facts of the past and they understand the story. But if we can help people become more inquisitive and begin to ask questions of other people's lives, how much more caring will we be?
While we celebrate Thanksgiving with a table full of food, the very first Thanksgiving was actually quite the opposite. Priscilla Alden told us more.
Well, where I come from, a day of Thanksgiving is actually a day of fasting and prayer. It can be observed as a group or as a family. The last time we held a great day of Thanksgiving here was after there was some rains come, after a very long drought that we had, and we were very thankful, so we held a day of Thanksgiving. But I think what you're after is a harvest feast.
A harvest?
Yeah, a harvest feast can be had if your harvest is coming well and there's an abundance of food, where you might give thanks in another way and have yourself a feast.
Yes, the event that we identify as the first Thanksgiving happened somewhere in the fall of 1621. It was a 3-day event full of feasting and sports and military exercises.
And so a harvest feast here, the first one we ever had was right after the first harvest had come in well in the beginning here. There wasn't so many of us then as there is now, but the harvest being gotten, and we set about to give ourselves some good cheer.
And somewhere at some point in the course of the 3 days, the native people began joining the Pilgrims in the celebration.
And so we had some diverse foods and we all ate together. And then there being some Indians hard by us, they come by as well. And so we made room for them at the feast, and they went out and they got themselves some more deer, and we made we made room for them at the table, and they stayed. Did you know they stayed for 3 days?
Thanksgiving has always been a part of the New England experience. And in 1839, for the first time in decades, a pamphlet describing the first Thanksgiving was reprinted, and it was at that point that this 1621 event is rediscovered and named the first Thanksgiving. So that Thanksgiving had already taken its shape, but they look back to 1621 and said, oh, that's the beginning, because it was so similar. One event didn't necessarily influence the other.
But what about the food? Kathy Devlin told us what was on their table in the 17th century.
Eel and lobster would both be around at any time and could be on the table at any time. Probably venison. If it's very cold out, you could have some venison. You could have pork, duck, quail, goose. All of them are around in the autumn, that they aren't normally around any other times of the year. So they're eating more what's around and what's available than one specific meal because it's a certain day or anything like that. But poultry in particular, we know that. And then at the harvest feast in 1621, when the Wampanoag natives came, they did bring 5 deer with them. So we know the one thing that they had at what we think of as the first Thanksgiving was
Venison. That's deer meat. There was goose, there was duck, there was turkey, there was some swine that we did slaughter up, all good meats coming in, our breads. There was not much we could do in means of bread. The bread that we make from the Indian corn here is very coarse, but you can make a cheat bread if you mix up wheat and the maize corn, mix them together, make a cheat bread. That's fair toothsome.
probably turkey, more than likely. They're wild in New England, and they're plentiful, they're big, so you're eating them all the time, and they'll feed you for a while or feed a lot of people. Stuffing has not really been invented yet. What they might have instead is something called a pottage.
A pottage. Very simple. It's in truth one of the things I cook the most here for my family, for it serves a great many, and it doesn't take a lot of preparation. All you must do is you have a pot and you take the corn grits that you've sifted.
And it's corn, so it's not breadcrumbs, but it's the basic element of bread, ground up and just boiled till it's soft.
Add spices as you will.
Sage in it, you put onions in it.
Some diverse meat, so turkey or coney or venison, and then mix it all together over the fire and stew it as long as you will, and it makes a fair dainty dish. And that fills our bellies, gives us good belly cheer.
And I really want to know, did they enjoy cranberry sauce back then?
Probably not. Cranberries take a lot of sugar to be tasty, and they wouldn't, they're very tart. The colonial settlers, they don't love cranberries. They're around, they might have them, they might bake them into a tart if they were going to, but it's kind of a waste of sugar.
So whether it be 1621 or 2013, one thing we certainly have in common, we're all thankful for the food on our table and the company surrounding it. Many people think of pilgrims dressed in mostly black and white with very little color or style, when actually, pilgrims not only had a unique fashion sense, but also a colorful wardrobe as well. Denise Lebica is the manager of the Historical Clothing and Textiles Department at Plymouth Plantation, and she told me that she dresses many interpreters each year.
Usually around 59, 60. They each have about 3 changes of clothing, and with accessories included, it comes to about 1,500 items per year, which then come back at the end of the season. We close in a couple of weeks, and everything will come back, and it's laundered and dry cleaned and inventoried and mended and repaired and all of that stuff. So it's quite a lot of items, quite a lot of clothing.
Denise got me dressed in traditional 17th century style clothing from head to toe. She told me the different elements of the wardrobe.
Well, the basic foundation layer is a linen smock, which is a very long shirt-like garment. The foundation garment in the 17th century are a pair of bodies, or sort of, for lack of a better term, what we would consider a corset, which is a heavy reinforced upper garment that gives the period shape of the time. The next layer would be 1, 2, or even 3 wool petticoats over that, and that is the skirt part of your outfit. The top layer is called a waistcoat, and that could be linen, it could be wool, or it could be canvas, which is hemp cloth. Over that, you would wear a wool coat and a coif on your head, which is a little white linen cap, and then a felt hat, you know, a felt molded hat. So in the 17th century, women as well as men wore what's called a girdle, which is what we would consider a belt. Belts in the 17th century were not meant to hold pants up as much as acting like a tool belt. So it was a way to hold your small pocket that could be knit or made of leather or embroidered. And in your pocket you would keep small items such as coins, or if you were a woman, maybe your thimble and, you know, sewing notions kind of thing. And also a knife that you would use for cooking and eating. You could hang from your belt as well. So it really functioned more like a tool belt. Men, it's pretty similar, of course, lacking the pair of bodies. They're not wearing those, but they also start with a long linen undergarment, which is a shirt, much like a smock. Over that, they have a pair of breeches. Pants in the 17th century came to the knee. Over the shirt, they would wear a doublet, which is a heavy wool jacket, sometimes canvas as well. And again, a coat over that. The stockings in the 17th century were really long. They came up over the knee, and of course no elastic in the 17th century, so they all needed to be gartered or tied with some sort of ribbon-like thing, knitted, woven tape that would be tied under the knee to keep your stockings up, essentially. And then a pair of leather shoes or boots.
I asked Denise what their biggest challenge has been.
I think the challenge comes in the number of folks that we dress. I have myself and I have one assistant. So it's always tricky trying to meet everyone's needs as the cold weather progresses and people get cold. And the biggest challenge I have had in the past is the knitted accessories. Knitting, as anyone who knits knows, is very labor intensive, and it would take about 40 hours to knit one pair of stockings. So we accomplished that by having a volunteer knitting group come to Plymouth Plantation once a week, and they actually do all the knitted accessories. And that was actually the biggest challenge we have had recently, but we've managed to really meet that challenge in a great way.
From a TV host to English colonist in 10 minutes, now I'm ready for Thanksgiving in true 17th century fashion.